Let me introduce myself first before we start to speak about challenges to public and business administration. I am Alexander Ageev, professor, doctor of economic sciences, and head of director for Institute for Economic Strategies. And besides, I am in charge of Department for Business Project in National Nuclear University MIFI in Russia, and also I'm responsible for Global Ethics Forum in Russia. The issue we will discuss will be about public and business administration and what kind of challenges now exist for those very traditional and long story topics. And we'll cover a few subjects. First of all, we start with complexity and how we have knowledge, how we get knowledge about world and about people, about problems. Then we'll speak shortly about commons and differences in public and business administration. Then we'll speak about common global risks, which are important for both sides of business strategies. We'll speak about what is real business strategy, what is strategy, what is non-strategy. Then I'll speak about some more effective business models of strategic management. And besides, we'll speak about project management, about stakeholders, and what is responsible leadership is and how it is important in 10 revolutions and in 10 challenges for responsible leadership. So we'll start. Their life is really difficult. Otherwise, we would consider this life like a very simple. But if you imagine some piano and a lot of buttons, black and white, you will find that in reality we can see only narrow buttons. Other we couldn't see, we couldn't listen them, we couldn't touch them, and so on and so on. That's why we need some Röntgen rays or gamma rays or other infrared studies just to understand what is outside of our common and traditional impressions. We couldn't see all sounds, we couldn't see all light, we couldn't see even many waves in life, and that's why there is our principal limitations in this life and also for management processes. Besides, we live in different locations in this beautiful planet. That's why, for example, when you see a map of the world from American side of view, you'll see that's America. North America will be in the center of this map. When you see the map from Chinese point of view, you will see China as a center of this world, and so on and so on. All these aspects influence our impression about world and our motivations and so on. Besides, sometimes we'll try to imagine what kind of motivations has another person. But besides, you see the picture when he's a very young boy, just try to understand how the dog considers the world. And besides, what is the creative process when painter, for example, painting some bird, but he tried to imagine how from the very simple, very small egg, sometimes just immediately or just surprisingly appears the bird. That is strategic creative process. And that's why what is happening, what kind of processes is going on in human brain, that's also one of the key challenge, and modern science is trying to understand how the brain working, functioning, and one of the key challenge for next decades, if we are able to imitate in computers how human brain is working, not only just how the brain calculates things, but also some emotional things, love and hate and so on and so on. That is a very typical case. What is also important to keep in mind in our perception of world, there is so-called effect of black swans. Nassim Taleb mentioned about this and wrote the book about black swans. He meant some kind of surprises which occur without any predictions. And for us, they have huge consequences, influence, and so on and so on. But the problem that's not only black swans exist, but real problem that there are a lot of black swans. We live in the world which is a lot of which is full of such black swans, such surprises, and so on. And also there is one more serious influence on our perception of world and our managerial practices and so on. That is so-called Hollywood effect. Many things, many catastrophes, many tragedies, and many patterns of behavior, first of all, started in cinema. You see the picture, great earthquake, cataclysm, and so on, but sometimes we started just remembering that we saw it in some cinema. Cinema sometimes is the predecessor for some tragedies and so on, and sometimes we couldn't even identify where is cinema, where is reality, and that is a very serious problem. For such limitations and as an attempt to compensate this limitation of our mind, there is a model, RPM model, which requires, first of all, to provide so-called recognition of the problems. And that is first step in strategic management, regardless public or business. We need to recognize if there is a problem, if the problem exists. And if we recognize, then we must make some steps to prioritize, to make priorities, to identify importance of this problem, or maybe we decide that this problem is not important and this just information signal, and no need to make any steps for this. But if we provide some priority, if we assess the problem, the challenge as a serious and important issue, then we should decide should we ready to mobilize resources, to accumulate resources just to keep with this problem, just to face, just to prevent negative consequences for this. And then if we succeeded to mobilize the resources, we have a chance to compensate and to prevent all these negative effects. Actually, evidently, this model recognize, prioritize, and mobilize should be very critical for our any attempts to manage anything in life, in your personal life, in public administration or in business administration. Actually, everything I speak was expressed a long time ago by Nobel Prize Mr. Prigozhin, who mentioned world is too complicated to be expressed by one language only. We have to use a number of definitions connected through technical transformation. So it means such limitations, such peculiarities of our perception and our mind, our human mind, means that first of all, in any managerial situation, we should understand that our understanding, our approach is not the monopoly. It's not the right for monopolistic truth. We need to understand that we are extremely limited in our perceptions and in our assessments. Moreover, the problems which we face now have some very serious specific features which are more acute than before, 100, maybe 50 years ago and so on, because all systems which are functioning, living system or technical systems, especially also ecological systems, they are open systems, and you couldn't provide very strong, very strict borders between them. Besides, the principles, how they are functioning, also based on the so-called strange attractors. It means that sometimes very difficult to identify targets or senses why those systems are functioning. Besides, now we face with a lot of hidden subjects, players, actors in all such turbulences and so on, and actually we need to work with some kind of submarines, a lot of submarines, not only just a yellow submarine, but a lot of other submarines like hidden actors. In many respects, it means some terror danger. In some respect, it means just some financial crimes and so on and so on. Besides many of those problems are very resistant to formalization, to modeling. Sometimes very difficult to provide model. It's maybe interesting for diploma or some dissertation, but for real practice it's very difficult. That's why politicians sometimes prefer to use intuition or communication in very trivial way than to use formal models. Besides, many situations in our current world are very unique. We never faced the situations before. Besides, work of many systems, also technogenic system, ecological system, social system, has ability and propensity to generate some unpredictable violations. Besides a lot of other latent processes. And also, what is very important, there is great importance of very small events and how to live in this world. And that is first requirements to our thinking, not just to be integral thinking or to be open thinking. First requires to provide such models for business practice or public practice which will be sufficient for us. Not too complicated, not too simple, but they should be sufficient. We see on slides Swiss knife. And you can identify very primitive knives with just 3 or 4 functions. You can find some knives with much more functions. Then you can find knives with such functions which we couldn't identify for what, without some special education. And at last you can find famous Swiss knife with at least 200 functions, and nobody could imagine, besides maybe producer, for what all this function. That's why it's impossible to use this model, even this knife, for more traditional function. That's why there's principal requirement to business models to have the level of complexity which will be sufficient for our understanding and for planning actions. So this first part was about perception and about limitations and opportunities of our mind.